The war that wasn't meant to be. The cold void of space stretched endlessly, broken only by the shimmering glow of distant stars and the hulking silhouette of warships drifting silently in formation. The air aboard the Celestial Reckoning, the flagship of the United Earth Federation, was tense. Officers moved briskly, their boots clanking softly against the steel floors, while holographic displays flickered with streams of data. Admiral Elias Kane stood at the helm, his sharp blue eyes locked onto the massive viewport ahead. Out there, just beyond the asteroid belt, was the Vroth Dominion's fleet, a formidable force that had dominated the galactic theater for centuries. Their warships, sleek and obsidian black, hovered like harbingers of destruction. This was humanity's last stand. It was never supposed to come to this. The Vroth Dominion, one of the oldest and most advanced empires in the known galaxy, had deemed humans unworthy of their place among the stars. To them, Earth was an anomaly, an upstart species that had clawed its way from primitive combustion engines to interstellar travel in less than a century. The galaxy had watched in awe and fear. Humanity's rapid ascent was unnatural. While other civilizations spent millennia refining their technology, humans adapted, innovated, and surpassed expectations with reckless abandon. They reverse-engineered alien artifacts in months, optimized power sources that others had taken centuries to refine, and most terrifying of all, they refused to be controlled. And so, the Vroth had issued their ultimatum. Surrender Earth and its colonies. Submit to their rule. Accept that humans were lesser beings. The United Earth Federation had sent their response. 2 words. Come and try. A civilization on the brink. Now, here they were, on the edge of annihilation. The Vroth had brought their full armada, expecting an easy conquest. Hundreds of dreadnoughts, thousands of warships, a fleet so vast it blotted out the light of distant stars. The humans, they had a fraction of that. Status. Admiral Kane's voice was calm, but the officers at their stations knew what was at stake. Commander Lorna Voss, a woman with short silver-streaked hair and a reputation for unyielding grit, turned from her console. Vroth fleet holding position just outside the asteroid belt. No movement yet. Kane narrowed his eyes. They're waiting. For what? For us to surrender. A bitter laugh escaped one of the junior officers. No one else found it funny. We have no chance in a straight fight, said Commander Voss, her voice edged with frustration. They outgun us 20-1. Kane exhaled slowly. He already knew this. Every tactical simulation, every war game, every strategy meeting had come to the same conclusion. A traditional engagement was suicide. But humanity had never been traditional. They had one advantage. One desperate, reckless, and insane advantage. A different kind of warfare. The Vroth were technologically superior in every way. Their ships had energy shields impervious to conventional weapons. Their hulls were made of exotic materials that could withstand plasma barrages for days. Their fleets had crushed empires before humanity even left their solar system. But they had never fought humans. Not like this. Admiral Kane turned to his weapons officer. Are the payloads ready? Lieutenant Markov, a burly man with cybernetic implants gleaming under the dim bridge lights, gave a sharp nod. Aye, sir. We have the asteroids prepped for acceleration. Once launched, there's no stopping them. The Asteroid Catapult Initiative, humanity's last gamble. The Vroth's shields could repel energy-based attacks, but they couldn't ignore physics. Kane and his team had spent months studying Vroth technology, looking for weaknesses. They found one. The Vroth had never fought a species that weaponized entire planets. A rock-slinging civilization. Humans had been throwing rocks since the dawn of time. From prehistoric hunters hurling stones to the sky-splitting ballistic missiles of the 21st century, their entire military history revolved around hitting something really hard, really fast. So when they realized their energy weapons wouldn't cut through Vroth defenses, they turned to the oldest weapon in human history: mass. They weren't launching missiles. They weren't firing lasers. They were throwing entire asteroids. Each asteroid had been fitted with powerful thrusters, remotely controlled to adjust their trajectory. And now thousands of them, ranging from city-sized behemoths to car-sized projectiles, were about to become the deadliest weapons humanity had ever deployed. Kane clenched his jaw. Fire. The first shot of the last war. Deep within the asteroid belt, the engines ignited. Thousands of enormous space rocks, some larger than aircraft carriers, roared to life, accelerating toward their unsuspecting targets. The Vroth barely had time to react. The first wave struck like the wrath of an angry god. A kilometer-wide asteroid slammed into the leading Vroth battlecruiser. The shield flared, holding for a brief moment, before it shattered. The ship collapsed inward, torn apart by sheer impact force. Then came the second wave. The third. The sky rained destruction. Asteroids moving at 10% the speed of light turned the battlefield into an apocalyptic storm of debris and chaos. On the command bridge of the Celestial Reckoning, there was silence. Then, cheers. Commander Voss grinned. The bastards didn't see that coming. Kane allowed himself a rare smile. But he knew it wasn't over. The Vroth had underestimated humans. Now, they were about to learn why that was a mistake. The war had just begun. As more Vroth ships were obliterated under the relentless hail of kinetic bombardment, their once perfectly organized fleet fell into disarray. For the first time in their history, the Vroth weren't conquering. They were fighting for survival. And they were losing. Admiral Kane turned to his crew. "We're not done yet. Keep launching." Because in the vast, ruthless expanse of space, the Vroth had made a grave miscalculation. They thought humanity would bow to superior technology. They thought humans were too weak to resist. They thought this war would be over in an instant. They never expected that humans wouldn't fight on their terms. Humans didn't play by the rules. They broke them. And they had just rewritten the rules of war. The day the stars trembled, the battlefield that once belonged to the Vroth Dominion was now a graveyard of shattered warships. Humanity's first strike had done the impossible. The unbreakable defenses of the Vroth had been broken. Their mighty dreadnoughts, ships that had once reduced entire civilizations to dust, now drifted as lifeless husks, torn apart by the relentless force of planetary debris. The bridge of the Celestial Reckoning was silent except for the low hum of control panels and the static-filled voices of Allied commanders reporting confirmed kills. Admiral Elias Kane exhaled slowly. He had expected losses. He had prepared himself for the fact that this battle could have ended with humanity's last stand. Instead, they had done the impossible. But he wasn't naive. The Vroth Dominion was wounded, but they weren't defeated. Not yet. The enemy regrouped. Beyond the asteroid belt, what remained of the Vroth Armada was already reorganizing. The Dominion had never experienced defeat before. Every species they had encountered had either surrendered or been annihilated before they could fight back. But this was different. Aboard the Vroth flagship, Supreme Commander Xyphos Threll stood in the center of a massive war chamber, surrounded by high-ranking strategists and warlords. A holographic projection of the battlefield flickered before them, and it was chaos. Hundreds of Vroth warships had been destroyed outright. Others had suffered catastrophic damage. Their fleet, once a wall of impenetrable darkness, was now scattered and vulnerable. Threll's piercing, jet-black eyes scanned the reports flashing across the command displays. His four-clawed fingers curled into a fist. This should not be possible. A lower-ranking officer hesitated before speaking. The humans, they used the asteroid field as a weapon. We didn't. Threll's gaze snapped toward him, and the officer instantly fell silent. The Supreme Commander let out a long breath, trying to suppress his rage. "Their technology is primitive," he growled. "Their ships are weaker. Their shields are inferior. Their weapons are barely past combustion-based kinetics. Another strategist, an elder Vroth warlord, studied the battlefield hologram closely. "They know this," he murmured, "which is why they didn't fight on our terms." The room fell silent. Threll clenched his jaw. The humans had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. They couldn't outmatch the Vroth in ship-to-ship combat, so they had used the battlefield itself as their weapon. But Threll wasn't about to let the Dominion fall to an upstart species that had barely left its homeworld. "We will adapt," he said, voice low and controlled. "And we will remind them why the Dominion has ruled for millennia." The next phase begins. Back aboard the Celestial Reckoning, the crew barely had time to process their victory before the alarms blared. "Enemy movement," Lieutenant Markov shouted, his voice tense. "The remaining Vroth fleet is changing formation." Admiral Kane straightened. "Details." Commander Lorna Voss' fingers moved across the console, analyzing the data. "They're pulling back toward the far end of the system." Kane's eyes narrowed. That wasn't a retreat. No, the Vroth weren't running. They were setting up their next move. "Scan the sector," Kane ordered. "Find out what they're planning." The scanners hummed, and within seconds, Voss' expression darkened. "Sir," she swallowed, "we've got incoming energy signatures. Multiple." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. "How many?" Voss looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thousands." The Vroth counterattack. From the depths of space, the Vroth unleashed their true power. The first wave was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The Vroth weren't sending standard warships this time. No, this was something else entirely. From the flagship, Supreme Commander Threll gave the order. "Deploy the Scourge." Across the remaining Vroth fleet, massive hangar bays opened simultaneously. But instead of fighters or bombers, what emerged were dark, insect-like constructs, each bristling with organic armor and pulsating with eerie blue energy. The Scourge drones. These weren't ships. They weren't piloted by Vroth warriors. They were living weapons, self-replicating, autonomous, programmed for one purpose only: total eradication. Within moments, the swarm descended upon the human fleet. The battle becomes personal. On the Celestial Reckoning, the screens lit up with thousands of new hostile signatures. The incoming mass was fast, far faster than anything they had encountered before. "They're coming in hot," Markov shouted. "No energy readings. We can't lock onto them with standard targeting." Commander Voss swore under her breath. "They're moving like a damn hive mind." Kane's grip on the console tightened. He had seen reports of these things before, whispers from doomed colonies at the edge of Vroth-controlled space. Now, they were here, and they were coming for Earth. "Fire at will," Kane ordered. The fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons roared. Railguns unleashed storms of hypersonic projectiles. But the Scourge were unlike any enemy before. Some were destroyed instantly, their organic shells torn apart by the sheer firepower. But the rest, they adapted. They twisted in midair, dodging faster than any eye-controlled fighter. They learned with each shot, their formations changing, moving like liquid through space. Then, they struck back. The first wave hit the outer ships like a plague. Metal hulls screamed as the Scourge drones latched onto them, burrowing into the armor like parasites. Within seconds, ships were being consumed from the inside out. Kane watched in horror as the ESS Dauntless, one of their best cruisers, was overtaken. The once majestic warship twisted in agony, its hull being stripped layer by layer as the Scourge tore through it. Seconds later, it exploded. The fight for survival. "Sir, the swarm is penetrating our defenses," Voss called out. Kane clenched his teeth. He had to think. Fast. They had expected a standard battle. But this was a slaughter. And then, an idea. Redirect all fire toward the asteroid debris field. Kane barked. Voss turned, wide-eyed. "Sir, they're biological." Kane snapped. They're living creatures. If they're moving that fast, they can't maneuver around all that debris. We funnel them into the wreckage. Voss' eyes lit up with understanding. You want to turn space itself into a minefield. Exactly. The order was given. The human fleet fired their remaining thrusters, drawing the swarm into the dense debris left from the earlier asteroid bombardment. The first wave of Scourge slammed into the wreckage at full speed. They had adapted to human weapons, but not to physics. The battlefield became a graveyard of its own. The war was far from over. For now, they had bought time. But Admiral Kane knew this was only the beginning. The Vroth wouldn't stop, and neither would humanity. Because if there was one thing humans did best, it was this. They survived. The war humanity refused to lose. The void of space had turned into a battlefield unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Shattered warships drifted as burning wreckage. Fields of asteroid debris, once silent and untouched for millennia, had become deadly killing zones. And in the midst of it all, the unyielding remnants of Earth's fleet fought on, refusing to surrender. The Vroth Dominion's Scourge drones had proven to be their deadliest weapon yet. Organic, self-replicating, adaptable. They weren't just machines. They weren't simple drones. They were living nightmares. Human weapons, designed for traditional space combat, had done little to stop the tide. But humans had something the Vroth had never encountered before. Sheer, unrelenting ingenuity. Admiral Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the Celestial Reckoning, watching the battle unfold through the vast viewport. His crew fought with desperation and precision, adapting on the fly, pushing their technology past its limits. Every strategy that had worked for other species had failed against the Vroth. But humans weren't other species. They were unpredictable. They changed the rules. The battlefield of chaos. The Scourge drones moved like a sentient plague, slipping through defensive fire, latching onto hulls, and burrowing deep before detonating in brilliant blue explosions. Every ship they consumed became part of the swarm, every fallen vessel fuel for their relentless advance. And yet, humanity fought back, redirecting power to forward shields. Lieutenant Markov barked over the chaos of the command deck. Alpha Squadron is down to their last torpedoes. Another officer called. Commander Lorna Voss slammed her hand against the console. If we don't take out that central hive cluster, the swarm will just keep multiplying. Kane narrowed his eyes. Voss was right. The Scourge wasn't infinite. It was fast. It was relentless, but it had a source. They had tracked the hive carriers hidden within the remaining Vroth fleet, mothership-sized vessels that weren't just deploying the Scourge. They were growing them. And that was their weakness. Kane turned to his weapons officer. Give me a firing solution on the hive cluster. Sir, those ships are deep behind enemy lines. I didn't ask if it was easy, Kane snapped. I asked if it was possible. A tense pause. Then, slowly, the officer nodded. It's possible. Kane turned to Voss. Get me the reclaimer units. It's time. Deploying the last hope. The reclaimer units were one of Earth's most experimental projects, a desperate innovation that had never been tested in full combat. Automated combat suits, controlled remotely from human carriers, designed specifically for boarding operations. The Vroth had believed their technology was superior, that no species could stand against them. But what if they weren't fighting humans? What if they were fighting human ingenuity at its peak? The human counterattack. At Kane's order, the reclaimer units launched from hidden compartments aboard the remaining human fleet. Dozens of metallic pods shot across the battlefield, zigzagging through the chaos, avoiding debris and enemy fire. Inside, the reclaimer AI activated, linking directly to operators on the human command ships. Soldiers didn't need to be on the battlefield anymore. They were the battlefield. Aboard the Vroth high ships, alarms blared. The first reclaimer units breached their hulls. Vroth warriors turned in shock as automated steel war machines tore through the corridors, cutting down anything in their path. They were faster, stronger, unkillable. And they had one objective: destroy the high ships. The turning point. The Vroth weren't prepared for this. They had never encountered a species willing to throw everything at victory. Most civilizations surrendered when the odds were hopeless. Most civilizations stopped fighting when their fleets were outnumbered. Most civilizations accepted their fate. But humans weren't most civilizations. They were something else entirely. They were relentless. As the reclaimer units stormed the hive ships, the swarm outside began to falter. The scourge drones, which had been coordinating their attacks flawlessly, suddenly stumbled in their movements. Their hive was dying. And then, the first explosion rocked through space. One of the hive ships detonated, sending a chain reaction through the scourge network. The once unstoppable plague was now breaking apart, unable to coordinate, unable to repair. One by one, the hive ships fell. And with them, so did the scourge. The moment, the Vroth lost. On the command bridge of the Celestial Reckoning, cheers erupted. They're breaking formation. They're falling back. Admiral Kane exhaled, gripping the edge of his console. It wasn't over, but they had survived. And for the first time in galactic history, the Vroth were retreating. Kane turned to his crew, his voice steady, but filled with something that had been missing since the war began. Hope. Send a transmission to Earth, he ordered. Tell them the truth. Commander Voss blinked. What truth, sir? Kane's lips curled into a small, defiant smile. We just made history. A new dawn for humanity. The battle was won, but the war wasn't over. The Vroth had been defeated, but they weren't finished. They would regroup. They would adapt. But so would humanity. Because now, for the first time, the galaxy had seen what humans were capable of. Not just survival, not just war, but victory. And as the remains of the Vroth fleet disappeared into the void, one truth echoed across the stars. Humanity was here to stay.